Hi class, it's Miss Miller and thank you so much for joining me. Today we're going to continue our discussion about the validity of a penny. And so we're looking at source number 5 by Mark Lewis where he talks about banning the penny. And this is really an extension of our work that we did in class, and I really want to reinforce the reading to make sure you understand it. So please take out the reading, it's very short, and be prepared to take notes in your notebook. The objective for today or this week is that students will be able to evaluate 7 to 12 nonfiction texts on the validity of the penny by first discussing, which you do on Wednesdays, the pros and cons, presenting, which you do on Fridays, the major assertions, and writing, which you'll do on Monday, a timed argumentative response on the topic through the end of the week. So everything that we do today is going to support you in that. Today you guys generated your own set of questions as it pertained to Mark Lewis's Ban the Penny article. And this is our source number 5 out of 12. And so we saw that when we did our first read and we identified the phrases that might help us sum up each of the sections of the text, we recognized from our check for understanding that we still had some questions. And so here are mine. Does Lewis endorse Coe? What happened over the course of the year? Why does Lewis refer to the penny as pesky and useless? What does Lewis imply by copper-coated scourge? Does he establish its credibility by referring to Coe as a U.S. rep in paragraph 1 and the Arizona Republican in paragraph 2? Why is the bill suffering? What does it mean to languish? Does rounding up make any impact or any difference at all? How does Lewis disclose the value in the penny both strengthen and weaken his argument? What resolution is Lewis referring to? Does he like Coe? Why does Lewis emphasize Wharton's richness? And what does this emphasis in Wharton cornering the market for the nickel imply about the value of the penny? So hopefully these questions, if we ask these questions at the beginning after we do a closer read today and we do this activity where we chunk, we can begin to answer or address some of these questions. Now let's take a look at the reading that we discussed today. And we really asked a series of questions on it. And I think after we go back and reread this text, we're going to be able to answer some of those questions. Now what I've done here is I've highlighted all of the phrases that were significant to that particular section of the text. And the phrases actually will help us to summarize that portion. So for example, if we look at paragraph 1, I highlighted anti-penny bill. I also highlighted the phrase copper-coated scourge. And these two phrases are important because if I were to go back to this, this gives me a good depiction of what this particular section of the text is referring to. I also did what's called chunking. And chunking is taking each of the paragraphs, breaking them down, and really making sure that I understand what each section what is happening in each section. Because this text is a little bit dense, and what I mean by dense is it's challenging to read. As you can see when we did the check for understanding today, we struggled to understand this text. That's why we formulated and generated a series of questions. And so Common Core requires us to reread a text multiple times. So when we do this now, we're going to not only identify phrases that are significant, but we want to chunk it into pieces. So for example, and you'll see this, the verb that I choose to begin my chunking for paragraph 1 is reminds, because that's exactly what Lewis is doing. He's reminding us of the anti-penny bill. So the chunking should read reminds us of the anti-penny bill. Now if we took a look at paragraph number 2, the two phrases that I've highlighted to help me identify what this paragraph is about would be cash transactions and rounded up or down. Now this tells me a little bit more about this act. So my actual chunking, the verb I'll use is details. And the rest of the chunking will say details how the bill operates. If we look at paragraph 3, we're going to see that the phrase, and you may select something different for your phrase, but rich in zinc is what is important and stands out to me. So I've highlighted that in blue. And my chunking, my verb is going to start with describes. Now, the entire chunk is going to say describes how Tennesseans support the bill because of their rich zinc. And you'll notice I actually use the phrase in my chunking, which is okay to do. If we take a look at paragraph 4, we'll see that I highlighted 20th anniversary. And my hope is that you have the reading in front of you and perhaps you're able to take some additional notes on your reading that we covered today about Band Penny. Okay, by Mark Lewis. So paragraph 4 again, 20th anniversary. And in this case, and this is really important because this paragraph is a little bit difficult to navigate. And so if we take a look at the chunking, I included discusses the celebration, and this part's important because this takes over the last part of this paragraph, elaborates on Kolb's copper preference, which it really does. And I think that really exemplifies what's happening there. And then the 5th paragraph I highlighted, and many of you selected this when we did the check for understanding in terms of what is this paragraph doing, economic sense. If we do a reread of it, I think that's what this paragraph might be about. So in this case, justifies is what Lewis is doing, and Lewis would be Mark Lewis, the author of this reading, justifies Wharton's school's capacity to start the study. So later, let's say a week from now, we have to do a response to this, and we don't want to have to reread this entire document. All we have to do is go through our notes, look at what we have for chunking. So if you said, okay, if I asked you, can you please tell me what this reading is about? You just read your chunking. Here we go. This reading, Ms. Miller, it begins with reminding us of the anti-penny bill, and then it details how the bill operates. It goes on to describe how the Tennesseans support the bill because of their rich zinc, and discusses the celebration and elaborates on Kolb's copper preference. And finally, Lewis justifies Wharton's school capacity to start the study. Now, we did all of that so that we can actually be prepared to do this. So, if you recall in our last lecture, we sort of emphasized how important it was to first acknowledge what the text was saying, and then we could sort of assert what we think. And so we also made the distinction between the three sentence starters or stems to help us in our argument. And we did draw the conclusion that number 2 and 3 might be more complex. So originally I developed my own assertion. And so as a result of reading this new source, and source number 6, I've come to a new conclusion. So I have selected number 3. And so here is how mine would read. And please keep in mind I've modified it just a little bit, but for the most part, I'm keeping it the same. Lewis sides with Kolb, who argues that pennies have very little value and should be rounded up and down. I have mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, I agree that, as Lewis puts it, pennies can be pesky. On the other hand, I still insist that people have become attached to this coin, and it holds more than just a monetary value. Now, this is to make sure that you're actually doing the work. So your entrance ticket tomorrow is, when I greet you at the door, I would like for you to hand me a penny. Just one penny.